Hello, I'm Neil Nunes with the BBC News. Hong Kong police say they've arrested 5 executives from the pro-democracy Apple Daily newspaper under security laws imposed by Beijing. Officials say the 5 were suspected of colluding with foreign powers. From Hong Kong, here's Danny Vincent.
The police officers arrived in the early hours of the morning, arresting Apple Daily executives. Hong Kong's National Security Department said that the individuals were being investigated for endangering national security. This is the second time the police have raided the opposition newspaper. Journalists inside the building live-streamed the raid. Apple Daily is owned by Jimmy Lai, the outspoken critic of the government, who is serving time in prison for his involvement in the 2019 protest movement. He has separately been charged with violating the national security law.
President Biden has warned his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that if the imprisoned opposition activist Alexei Navalny were to die, it would be devastating for Russia. Mr. Biden was speaking after his first summit with President Putin in Geneva, at which he also raised concerns about 2 American citizens in jail in Russia. Our correspondent Gary O'Donoghue reports.
On several areas of American concern, Ukraine, cyber attacks and the treatment of Russian opposition figures, President Putin pushed back hard. For his part, Joe Biden said they'd set out some rules of the road, but he wouldn't stop raising human rights, press freedom and Russia's actions in Ukraine. In what he called a positive meeting, he said ambassadors would return to each other's countries and there would be discussions on nuclear proliferation.
The U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has reversed a controversial Trump administration policy which made it more difficult for those fleeing domestic or gang violence to be granted asylum. David Willis has more details.
This move will make it easier for those fleeing domestic or gang violence at home to win asylum claims in court. But it comes at a time when the Biden administration is already struggling to control a surge of migrants at the country's southern border, and as the number of children crossing into the U.S. is approaching an all-time high. Immigrant advocates who accuse the Trump administration of demonizing those in the greatest need of protection have welcomed the Attorney General's move.
The Supreme Court in the U.S. state of South Carolina has blocked 2 executions until the inmates can be offered the choice of death by electrocution or by firing squad. A new law requires those on death row to have the choice if lethal injection drugs aren't available, but as the prison hasn't yet organized a firing squad, the executions are on hold. World News from the BBC. Save the Children says more than 700,000 Rohingya children are facing severe discrimination and denial of their most basic rights across several different countries. The aid agency says the children are vulnerable to sexual abuse, trafficking and detention, as well as being forced to work. They have no legal protection and often can't get access to education. Hundreds of indigenous people in Brazil have clashed with police during protests against a government bill that could open up their ancestral lands to farmers, loggers and miners. Leonardo Rocha reports.
Police in the capital, Brasilia, say they responded with pepper spray after some of the protesters wearing body paint and feather headdresses launched arrows in their direction. The legislation was initially proposed in 2007, but it has been modified and reinstated in Congress by President Jair Bolsonaro and his supporters. Indigenous leaders say the bill is a huge threat to them. It will restrict the official demarcation of their ancestral lands and will effectively legalize mining and farming inside their reservations, which has until now been banned.
A preliminary report into the collapse of a metro line track in Mexico City last month says it was caused by structural flaws. 26 people died in the disaster. The Mexican authorities said a Norwegian engineering company observed deficiencies in the material used, including bolts, and previous damage to the structural supports where the overpass collapsed. In football, Wales, Russia and Italy have all secured wins at Euro 2020. Italy continued their pre-tournament billing as one of the favourites with their second win in a row, this time a comprehensive 3-0 victory over Switzerland. Earlier, Wales beat Turkey and Russia got their first points with a 1-0 victory over Finland. BBC News.